All right, so today we're going over what advanced lifters do differently than most lifters to actually become advanced. This is something that over the years of my experience in natural lifting and in the community, of course, this is something I've developed quite the eye for. And I think anybody that's lifted long enough, you start to see this. You go through almost a beginner phase, and this is me detailing my story, and it's pretty similar to what I see from most other experienced lifters. You start off and you overthink everything. You worry about every little detail, and it's almost to your detriment. But at the same time, you're optimistic and you're curious and you're learning and you're constantly evolving. You eventually get to a spot, and this of course happened to myself, where you don't think that many things matter. You keep getting told it doesn't matter, just do this, it doesn't matter, just do this, just do that. And you start to become a little bit nihilistic and almost like black pilled in a way about learning about lifting. You start to think that everybody, all the advanced lifters that are better than you, it's purely because of genetics, and it's only because they have just been doing it a bit longer, and that's why they're there. This isn't the case. Over the years, I've had my ups and downs as a lifter. I've had times where I thought anything works, and I'll just go in, lift hard, and eat, and keep pushing progressive overload, and I'll just turn into advanced lifter magically over the years. And it doesn't necessarily work that simplistically. It's a little bit more complex than that. And this is the point where I think you start to become more of an intermediate or advanced, and not even to get into those terms, but more of an, I guess, a well-rounded lifter that has an eye for attention to detail. And I think this attention to detail is much deeper than it looks on surface level. There's a lot of things that the best natural bodybuilders do and the best lifters do. And to even break away from just the confines of this, professionals in anything, they have their methods, they have their routines, they have their rituals. And it's these things that actually make a pretty big difference. It's like, sure, genetics are a factor, but it's not just that. It's not just luck. It's not just genetics or just happening to find the right training program at the right time in the right environment. There's a lot more to it than just this. And like I said, it's something that you develop an eye for over time. The first one that I have here, before I get to it, look at that hammer strength machine. How beautiful is that? It has two functions. It does an incline, almost like an anterior delt press with a little bit of upper chest in there as well. It's also an underhand lat pull down. Beauty of a find on Facebook Marketplace for my home gym guys. Stay patient, keep your eyes open. You can always negotiate. I actually didn't negotiate with this guy because I was like, "This, you're selling this for so cheap. I'm just gonna put in the offer. I'll actually pay more if you need me to." That's totally fine. Beauty of a find. Pain in the ass to get into a basement, that's for sure. Super heavy and clunky, but she's a beauty. The first thing I have on my list today is that when it comes to the way that these guys train, failure is real failure. When they hit failure, technical failure, muscular failure, whatever it is, they actually hit it. Here's the difference. They don't lower their effort levels to get there sooner. If you're half-assing a lift, the rest of your body is loose and you're thinking about something else, looking off into the corner and doing whatever, a lateral raise. If your effort level isn't that high and you're not giving a controlled explosive or a forceful effort on the concentric, especially on lifts that have a kind of a skewed tension curve, these lifts you can hit failure on pretty quickly. Something like a lateral raise, if you're not giving a controlled explosive or a forceful momentum or push into the raise of a lateral raise, it's pretty easy to hit failure. And this is a tough one because you can technically hit failure, but it's with a low effort level. And this is where failure becomes a bit of a gray area. So if your effort levels are super high and you had a gun to your head, you could probably hit a few more reps, even if you technically failed that rep. So this is a version of cutting corners, and this is shying away from discomfort. And this is something that when I see stuff like this, it tells me that you're not entirely serious about building as much muscle as possible, because muscle's built in the uncomfortable spots. It really is. It's not just that simple, but the lifts that get you uncomfortable and the areas in the effort levels that go into lifts that get you uncomfortable is generally what's going to be actually building your muscle and growing you. And this leads me into my next point. So they fight a rep until they fail, not when they decide they think they don't have it. So same example with that lateral raise. They're not just raising out to the side with kind of a half-assed grip on the dumbbell. They're not really breathing properly. Everything else in their body's loose. Everything's rigid. Their pure goal is living in the moment to get that next rep up. And when they can't do it, they can't do it. And whether you stop the set there or you like intensity methods, either one's fine. You want to make sure you're taking your lifts not necessarily to failure. I think there's definitely a time and a place for that. It all depends on your program. But you can judge your proximity to failure based on true failure, not, oh, my effort level's low, so therefore my failure level is going to be a little bit sooner in that set. They're not afraid of failure, they chase it. Rather than artificially making failure easier to achieve, they go towards it methodically. The next point that I have is the level of competitiveness that these lifters have. And this isn't just the advanced lifters, this is the people that are on their way to becoming advanced. And I think this is something that I embody pretty well. And I try and talk about it on the channel. I try and show it on the channel, which I'll be doing more of in the future, of course, with my training logs and everything. More on that later. But competitiveness it's an important trait. And I think understanding that your goal physique is more of it's your peer, not necessarily your superior, at least in the long term. That's an important concept to understand. A lot of people, and this is mostly for the younger guys, and I was like this myself before when I was younger. I would look up to these goal physiques, so maybe some high-level natural bodybuilder or just a natural lifter on social media, and I would almost see these guys as almost unrealistic, and I would put a false limit on myself, if that makes sense, because I would think I'm not as good as this person is, comparing myself now to them wherever they're at. But you have to truly understand, not to be too cliche, that they're just a peer. I'm a natural lifter, maybe a little bit younger or earlier in my journey at the time, and this person that I'm striving to achieve that level of muscle mass, that's potentially just me in the future. I just don't necessarily know that yet, and I have to earn it. So being competitive and saying, all right, well, this person, inside we're the same person, it will just take me a few extra years and to learn more about lifting to catch up to them, then it becomes a pretty cool concept. And at that point, in your mind, it kind of clicks that that's an achievable physique. And I think that's important for a lot of people to understand. And I know a lot of people like to say, it's you, don't compare yourself now to someone else 3 years later or whatever that quote is. I think it's important to realize that even if someone else is ahead of you, that doesn't mean that you can't catch them in a sense. And yeah, maybe when you catch up to them, if it takes you 3 years to build that much muscle, they'll be that much farther ahead. But that's not the point of this concept. You're not actually trying to catch up to them. You're just realizing they have a certain amount of muscle mass and you can 100% do it too. Don't see that as an impossible goal. Just see it as, oh, this person did it, so I will do it as well. And I think that's an important one to get down, especially for the newer lifters or the younger guys. That's definitely important. Number 4 that I have, they don't have skeletons in the closet. And what I mean by this is they're not cutting corners. Their program is transparent. And that doesn't mean that the best lifters on social media always tell the truth and show everything about their training at all times. It means that if you were to look into their program, you would find that they hold themselves accountable for everything. If you were to look into the corners of each little aspect of the program and do a deep dive into it, everything has its purpose and they train everything properly. Even the things that aren't directly related to the program itself, but more of an indirect relationship like diet, sleep, mentally motivating yourself to go to the gym and crush your session, these things are all going to be in check. If you look at their body weight log, 1, they're going to have one, and 2, they're going to use it more often than not, if not every day. Same goes for measurements. They're going to film their lifts. Basically, every realistic and practical method that they could use to become the best lifter possible, they're taking full advantage of it. You're never going to find out like, okay, well, this person's training hard, they're progressing in the gym, They're filming their sets, they're improving their technique, progressive overload's taking place, but their diet sucks. Or they don't track their bulk and cut cycles, they don't weigh themselves. It's things like this, or they don't have a logbook for their training, they don't track anything. And I'm not saying you have to log your training, because I do think it's actually fine to not log it, and that you can progress well that way. A lot of people have. I do think it's generally a better thing to do to log your training. Of course, I'm not saying you have to, but if you were to do a deep dive into the way that these guys train and look into every aspect of their results, there's no holes. There's no missing links. They hold themselves accountable, and they actively try and find weak links to fix them and repair them and build them bigger. So little things like this, there's no blind spots. There's no dead spots. Everything works. Everything is always in check because they want it so bad. They desperately want to achieve this physique. This is something that I have. I know everything about my training, and I should, and you should too. Number 5, they live in the moment and they take it set by set. This is the takeaway from the video. If you have a takeaway, I do think this is the most important one. If you look at the way that the best lifters, the best natural bodybuilders lift to build that muscle mass, they take it rep by rep, set by set, day by day. They're not worried about how did my last rep go? Am I able to get my next rep? I have a 3x10 on curls and I'm at 8. It feels kind of tough. How do I get to 10? They don't think about it. I know guys that don't even track their reps during their set. I had a guy comment this on the last video. He doesn't even track his reps. He films his set to make sure his reps are quality. And of course, he watches the film back and then counts his reps. I think that's genius. You can just focus on proximity to failure, effort, and rep quality, and then you count your reps afterwards. So you're not distracted, you're not worried about it, you're just pushing as hard as you can, focusing on quality. Check the tape, of course, to ensure quality and try and find weak links and kind of train yourself that way, but also to count your reps. And I think that's a cool way to go about it. The way that I see it is live in the moment. If you're on an eccentric of a bicep curl, how do you make that as consistent and good as you possibly can? Don't worry about the next concentric. Don't worry about the next rep. Don't worry about your next set. The way I see it is get the most that you possibly can out of what you're doing right now at this very moment, and then worry about what you have to do next when the time comes. Worry about the next set in 3 minutes when you're doing the next set. Get everything that you can out of what you're doing right in this moment. This is a good way to eliminate junk volume too, by the way. This is the takeaway from the video. Live in the moment. Take it rep by rep. Take it eccentric by concentric. Take it set by set. It's day by day. Don't worry about tomorrow. Don't worry about your next set. These aspects of the program will work themselves out as you live in the moment and maximize what's right in front of you in that very moment. This is a great way to build a program and understand more about yourself and building your own program. The next one that I have, a lot of the best lifters, this is just an observation. It's not always the case, but the biggest natural lifters, what I've noticed with these guys, they master one lift and then expand once they have that down. I'm not necessarily saying that's the best way to go about it. I do think it can be almost minimalistic in a way, and I think for people that are new to the gym, while it's great advice to just go in and absolutely crush one lift that's in front of you, I do think in certain situations it's good to have variety and options. I think it's good experimenting and practice. I think learning the skill of lifting, like people that are new to the gym, volume's not going to kill you. You can't get that much out of one set. So yes, intensity has its place, but practice, volume, and experimentation also does. That's a topic for another video, but they master one lift. Like the best natural lifters, they know what that lift is and they are good at it. They're efficient at it. Their technique is flawless. And I don't mean it's perfectly strict and like slow tempo and everything's perfect. I mean, it is a set that milks every ounce of muscle growth you can out of that set. Like, I noticed this a ton with hack squats and leg presses. I think a lot of the top bodybuilders, especially the natural guys, they're incredibly good at these lifts. They have these down so precise that when you look at like your average, even like an intermediate lifter, the difference in how they hack squat or leg press versus the advanced guys, it's night and day. And once, like, I've trained with these types of guys before, I've been this type of guy too. I've picked up on this stuff and implemented it to myself. I'm not saying I'm an advanced lifter yet because I still think I'm far away from my peak. Of course, I'm still young. I have a lot of years ahead of me to prove that, but I'm setting myself up well to train like this and have my bread and butter lifts that I am just so good at and milk so much hypertrophy from. So I think building your base, and this is such a good thing to learn, especially as like an intermediate to advanced lifter, just get so good at a couple core lifts that you love, that work for you and challenge you biomechanically in a good way to target the specific muscle you're trying to train, and just crush it. Just keep going. You'll be adding reps, maybe adding sets over time, and you'll slowly kind of expand out from there, adding some variations, rotating as you need to, adding in a set here and there, and then expanding it to 2, maybe 3 sets down the road. I think mastering one lift, getting so good at it, I think it's key. And I think one thing that you notice from these guys is when you watch them do a set of, say, a leg press or a hack squat, the first thing that comes to mind is I promise you that set built you muscle right now. There is no way that set didn't give you any muscle gain. No way. When you see the stimulus, the intensity, the mental focus, the facial expressions, you say, okay, that set, that's building muscle. No way around it. No ifs, ands, or buts. 100% that's what it's doing. So I'm going to leave the video at that today. Not a bad second take. Long story short, halfway through the video it cut off and I lost the entire second half to it. So I think I got that back pretty much how I wanted to say it. I will see you guys in the next one.